Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Derek Marshall.
And I'm Sue Lano, your co-host.
And today we're going to be talking about historical geology, as what Doug likes to call hysterical geology. I think I heard it from Doug. Because evolutionists like to look to geology for proof that evolution took place. They look at fossils, paleontology, and they look at stratigraphy, which is the study of the different layers of soil and rock that we see in the earth. If you dig down deep enough, you'll see what's called strata, which they purport to be different layers of deep time that we go in. And so we'll be discussing different aspects of that. And for the first segment, we'll be talking about, and this is from the second chapter of The Revolution Against Evolution, the book authored by Doug. And this is historical geology and fault finding.
And then we'll be discussing the Chemistry of God series. Derek will be introducing the day one of the Genesis creation account from the perspective of his creation function.
And then after that, we have a message from Sue. She gives an evangelistic message.
Well, I'll be starting a little bit with the first 7 days of creation, and then talking about Jesus and who he is, and how our response needs to be in our recognition of some things related to that.
Well, that's pretty amazing. And then we'll have Doug's creation barrage, which he's put together for us. This one particular one's a couple minutes of some really quick hits as far as on the topic of historical geology, and he actually goes through a lot of the stuff that we go through, but also he's going to give some extra information for you, and that will be at the end of the show.
So is that going to be, don't let your geology mess up your theology?
Yeah, I love that. I love that a lot. He's got a lot of good information on that. And so what I'd like to hear from Sue is, you're a teacher, and have you taught any sort of geology or physical science or anything like that?
Geology only when I was compelled to. Mm-hmm. And it was usually part of like a program that was already curriculum based somewhat, but more recently I had to do it, and another teacher actually, she put it together for me because I just needed to fill in a class because they had a lot of students, and it also involved astronomy. So I used her geology, and we did a lot of focus on volcanoes and earthquakes and things. I did not focus too much on this. So I do not like to teach about lies in my classroom.
Right.
So I do not have a problem if I was going to be doing more than one model, like if I did the evolutionary versus the creation model. But we had a lot of exciting type topics, and I even had a little bit of laboratory work that we could do with the students, learning about different types of rocks, and you only have so much time, so I selected based on what she had given me, which was an excellent program that she had put together.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there, Sue. We're both physics majors. She's astrophysics. For a while, I was interested in becoming a teacher, and I even did some after-school science classes when I was going through in university. And really the main reason why I didn't become a teacher is because in the public school system, you're going to be teaching evolution. I just absolutely would refuse to teach any sort of evolution. Coming into this historical geology topic, if you do go to school, you do go to university, you'll be taught the conventional geological column, and and you may have heard a lot of these terms. These are formations that are always assumed basically to be depending on where you look in the earth, all in the same order and in some sort of deep time order over millions and billions of years. And you may have heard some of these terms. This is more, we'll talk about, we'll start from about the age of the dinosaurs, when the dinosaurs went extinct in the Cretaceous, the Jurassic, going older and older. Triassic, those are very familiar terms if you're into dinosaurs.
Or if you're into Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park,
the
that's
one
right.
you might know because
That's
of the
one that I
movie.
knew. That's the one I knew. And going through Doug's book, it had me dug into these different time periods. You have a Permian, you have the Pennsylvanian, Mississippian, Devonian, which is a lot of times people say that's the age of fishes. That's another one that I remember. Silurian, Ordovician, and Cambrian and Precambrian. Precambrian, Precambrian, you're getting really, really far back. I mean, Precambrian, you're talking what they purport to be billions of years. And we wanted to give you some examples of that. These crustal deformations, they exist. We don't deny that these exist. They exist. Overthrusts exist. They do exist.
Oh, definitely.
But I think they're used to be to try to explain away a lot of stuff that really shouldn't. They're calling things overthrusts that really aren't overthrusts. And we're going to go through a few examples here. For example, we're going to start with the Lewis overthrust. This is near Glacier Park, Montana. And it's a relatively large area, 300 miles long, 15 to 50 miles wide, depending on how you want to measure it. And what you have here is you actually have out of order strata. It's not in the order that I just read. You have Precambrian strata resting on, which is billions of years, right? Resting on top of million-year-old Cretaceous. So how do you explain that? Well, it's an overthrust, right? The Earth moved or what have you. And if I was actually able to find this one, I have a geology book in my at home, and I was actually able to find this one and how it's described. And even though they regard it as an overthrust, it does have a sharp contact line, and it's got a really interesting feature where the overthrust happened. It kind of spilled out all this rock, and then they say the glaciers and the rivers washed it all away, leaving one Precambrian mountain called Chief Mountain. It's just this rock that's just sticking up there, with Precambrian rock. So there's just a lot of reasons for why we would believe that the fact that we just see too many examples of out of order strata, and here's a huge example of that one.
Was it the Chief Mountain that moved quite a distance, or is this another one?
Well, I think the Chief Mountain is all the rock, all the strata that tumbled over in the thrust got washed away. Well, I'd like to know do we have any evidence of all that rock being further downstream or not?
Wow. Okay.
Another example of out of order strata is Red Rock Canyon in the Valley of Fire. Now, I think you guys were just there, or maybe I'm thinking you guys didn't visit that. But that's okay. Red Rock Canyon is near Las Vegas, Nevada. And this place has beautiful red, yellow, and purple Jurassic, Triassic, and Permian strata, sandstone, which is in the correct order, but on top of it, again, is this Cambrian limestone, which is much older than those three. So you have out of order strata there. And I noticed something as I was just going over this. We were saying that a lot of this out of order strata, and the strata is laid down by the flood. It was laid down while the flood was moving the land and stuff, was rearranging the earth during that time. This red, yellow, and purple is a perfect rainbow color, right? It's a perfect rainbow.
Didn't even think about that.
Which, if rainbow is a sign of the flood, so maybe it's God
neat.
trying to say, hey, flood.
Didn't even think about that. That's a great idea.
Yeah, I like that too.
Oh, yes.
But so that's Red Rock Canyon, and then also the Valley of Fire. There's also 75 miles away of the Valley of Fire, which has a similar sandstone with it's topped by the Cambrian. So in order for that whole area to be considered an overthrust, that'd be a huge overthrust, right? And then miraculously, these two separate overthrusts basically arranging themselves in the exact same order, even though they're apart, would be pretty far-fetched.
Wow. Yeah. And there's a lot of that. Those are just a couple of examples you've given. I remember, I know we will be talking more about a recent Grand Canyon trip that I did go on with Doug and Rich. And I believe this site might be included if you go on that in the future. There's another trip planned as well. And just so many different things we saw that relate to even what you're talking about.
Right. And then there is another example, Smoky Mountains. Here once again we have two large thrusts, and we have again this old was purported to be super old Precambrian rock over Ordovician, and you have the evidence of rock movement because mountains were being formed.
Oh, yes.
Right? But if you look closely enough, though, you do see a sharp horizontal contact line. Contact line is when you have two strata that are moving against each other. It's either sharp or it's hazy with lots of breccia, lots of junky stuff between them. You know, when it's sharp, it would tend to be more water deposition that would be more consistent with the global flood. And just this evidence of movement, the slick and slides alone really don't explain all of the movement that would need to happen.
Not.
And there's another, we have what's called catastrophic plate tectonics would be a more reasonable model for that. And another very, very interesting chapter or topic in this chapter is what Doug calls the fossils say no. And this is the one that I've caught on to, is we actually have what's called polystrate fossils. And polystrate meaning many strata, right? You actually have like a tree that's growing through several strata.
And it's not
go ahead.
It's not just one place on this earth. It's in a variety of different locations that we are finding this. And how do the evolutionists explain that?
Yeah, that's a good question.
They legitimately can't.
Yeah, they get a little confused over that one there. And that's not even the worst of it here. We find, like, for example, in Noggins, Nova Scotia, we have the petrified trees, but you have cat tracks, like in Slick Rock, Colorado, that go through strata. So you have some sort of animal walking through, literally time traveling, walking through time with these tracks. Human artifacts have been found in coal seams, like tools, nails, bones, jawbone, found in coal seams. I mean, there's a lot of evidence that that we have there's a lot of evidence against the idea of stratification of the earth being a clock of some sort. And I thought of something funny on the way here. You're a teacher, so you're gonna be able to understand the ridiculousness of how they use what's called index fossils. A particular fossil can date a strata.
Okay.
Right? So, I find this fossil, I know this is a certain age.
Makes sense.
But also, a strata can date a fossil. Both ways.
Isn't that a little circular in the reasoning?
That's always really, really bugged me. And that's bugged me, and it's bugged me, and it's bugged me. And it wasn't until today that I thought, what does that sound like? And this is what it sounds like. It sounds like you're a teacher, you've given your students a test. The test is kind of like strata.
Okay.
Right? The fossils are the answers.
Okay.
The students are supposed to bring the answers to the test.
Correct.
Right? But how would you like it, or would you allow for, I may not have the answer for that question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just write down an answer to a question I know and expect you to change the question on the test so I get an A. That's what that's like. Like, what you would do is you'd find a fossil in a strata, and you'd do one or the other. You date the fossil by the strata, or you date the strata by the fossil, but not pick whatever one works for your theory.
Yes.
So I just wanted to throw that out there. That made me feel better. It just doesn't work. And then the last thing that we'll discuss here is what's called radioisotopic dating. And we're not going to get too deeply into that. It's just that that's used a lot, and it requires a lot of assumptions have to be made for this to actually be something that would be legitimate. And one of the assumptions is that the original composition of the rock lacked the contaminants or lacked the products, the byproducts, the daughter elements that you're
Yes.
looking for.
It's like
Yeah.
totally pure with the starting element that's
Right.
going to decay. And then we just watch it over time decay, which also brings that they're assuming that from the beginning of time on this earth, that it was a constant radioisotopic decay.
That's right.
Which,
What we found is that decay rates, even the decay rate of a neutron, changes in the presence of neutrinos and neutronic or neutrino fields and stuff like that. So we can't really say that that was constant.
and also to say no additional contamination after solidification.
Right,
Can
during
we
the
assume
solidification
that? Can we
process,
say
there's a
that?
lot of stuff going on. And then even with that, even if after solidification, it's sitting there for purported billions of years, why would you have leaching, potential leaching of
Mm-hmm.
chemicals? They do, even though a chemical isn't necessarily in the aqueous or in the liquid state, it's not going to move.
Yeah, and you can't,
I mean-
and you can't assume that there will be no outside forces, such as temperature or pressure, that they're going to remain constant throughout this process.
That's exactly right.
So that is something that needs to be considered when using radioisotopic dating.
That's correct, yeah. The Earth is, it's not really a perfect laboratory if the scientists weren't there at the beginning of the experiment to know what the initial conditions are. Okay, so next I'd like to present, I have a segment that we're going to take a look at, a segment that we did several years ago, probably one of the first, if not the first, show that I did with Doug and Rich, introducing the creation function. We're going to be going through the creation function very slowly over the next 7 shows. I'm just going to start with day 1 from the perspective of the creation function.
You're going into it like, wow, into the elements
Yeah,
here, you
as a
know?
numbers guy, I've always been fascinated ever since I was a little boy with numbers, fascinated with math and science, love math and science. And my faith in God has always led me to try to apply that to the Bible, because the Bible has a lot of numerical information in it.
It's true.
It's all through the Bible from A to Z, from Genesis all the way to Revelation. You have numbers and dates and times and stuff. And I'm not talking about magic numbers or codes or anything like that. I'm just talking about factual numbers, how many were or how long it took and that type of thing. But did you know that the periodic table, the way it's laid out series by series, line by line, actually concurs with the creation story?
How does
The
that work?
creation story, with its 7 days, it's very obvious and funny that the periodic table has 7 series or 7 periods of its, each of these lines on this periodic table, there's 7 of these lines across. And that's the genius of how God has laid out the periodic table. He can use each of these elements like in a toolbox. If he wants to make a substance, he takes a little bit of your halogen, it takes a little bit of your alkali metal, puts them together, and you have a brand new substance that has its own personality and its own function and use. You know, so you can look at the periodic table like I believe God does as a toolbox. He's created a toolbox for him to make.
Of course, he made the tools in the first
He
place.
made the tools and he made the toolbox and he puts them together to form.
Now, you were showing me your little diagram on your phone.
Yes.
He has an animation of
Now, what I've come up with is, as a numbers type of guy, whenever I've read through the Bible, certain number patterns stand out to me. And when I went through university, I learned a whole bunch of number patterns. As you know, chemistry classes, physics classes, you learn to recognize patterns. And I recognized a certain pattern in the periodic table, and then I also recognized a pattern that's made by a certain function. It's called the exponential function. When you say something grows exponentially, that's an actual math function that's based upon a constant called E. You know, like we had National Pi Day, pi 3.14159.
Yeah.
There's also another constant called E. Well, that's another fundamental constant that exists. Well, the periodic table follows that constant. The first few periods of it follow that, makes a pattern. Well, I know how to make that pattern using a sequence of divisions of numbers, starting with the number 1, 2, 3, just like we see on the periodic table, and creating that pattern. It creates a spiral pattern, and the spiral pattern, if you let it go, you can let it go 7 times. It creates a pattern of numbers that creates another pattern when the pattern crosses the 180 degree mark of your circle or your 360 degree mark of your circle. So the way I interpret that, the way I bring this to the show here today, is God said He created the universe, the earth, in 7 days. And we think to ourselves, wow, 7 days, that's not a very long time to create an entire planet and stuff like that. Well, what my spiral can show, and we can put up the spiral graphic, is that as the pattern goes in the spiral fashion and crosses the midpoints, you could call the one half of the spiral where it goes above the middle line, we could call that night, and we can call the lower part day. So as it's going around and around, just like God may have when He was creating the earth, as He says, day 1 this happened, day 2 happened, you can see that as the spiral is in the smaller circle, it's like numbers 1, 2, 3, because the Bible says the creation was brought out in sequence. And the sequence has a sum. How great is the sum of the sequence, that the way creation was brought out. And God also used, in another passage, God used a compass. So that's where I bring in on my spiral, I bring in 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180 degrees. So when the spiral, as it's coming around, reaches and crosses the 180 degree point, what that means is going from night to day. So my point in all this is to say, we can interpret the 7 days of creation as 7 rotations of creation while God was creating. It's 7 rotations, because it's earth He's creating, He's moving in a circular pattern, and He's making the completion of that pattern after the 7th pass. Next, we would like to present Sue. She has a very good evangelistic message that she would like to present.
Okay, thank you. As you've been hearing about this, and hopefully you have received your copy and ordered a copy of The Revolution Against Evolution, we can have a lot of knowledge about creation and evolution, but what's really going to matter is your life in eternity. We were all created in God's image, male and female, as mentioned in the creation story of the Bible in Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, there was a heaven and the earth. They were void without form. God intervened and created all that we have: the water, the sky, the plants, the animals, and man and woman. But what happened, it was a perfect paradise. It started that way, and it was meant to be that way, I believe. But man chose to sin. Okay, many have heard the Adam and Eve story, and if you haven't, I want to encourage you to go find a Bible and read Genesis chapter 1, 2, and 3, where you can learn about what people commonly called the fall of man. It's where man first sinned, where God had told them not to eat of one particular tree, the tree of life, but yet even Adam did. And as a result, sin began. As a result, there was death, there was curse, there was evil that was able to rule and reign, or so appear, on the earth. So what happens is, going up to today, we all have sinned. Nobody has not sinned. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And God has told us that the wages of sin is death. But there is eternal life, which is a free gift from Jesus that we have by faith. It's by grace, not our works, but by faith that we can have that. Now, Jesus taught that He said He was the way, the truth, and the life. No one, no man, no woman can come to God except through Him. So we need to understand, why is this Jesus the way? Well, Jesus showed us that he was God. He showed us that he died on the cross. He taught about that for our sin, so that we can be right standing before God. So we would not get judged for our sin. For all men will be judged when they die, and there might be some judgment on this earth as well for our sin. But when we die, and whether we stand in heaven with God forever or not will depend on what we did with Jesus, who's the way. He also said, I am the truth. What Jesus says is true. He preaches, he teaches about creation while he was on this earth. That is truth. There is a truth that we are sinners, that we need forgiveness. We need to have our sin taken care of, that Jesus took on the cross. His blood was shed for forgiveness of sins, so we can receive that forgiveness from God. He was buried. 3 days later, he rose again. 3 days later, so that he triumphs over grave and the death, and we can live forever with him. So now it is up to each and every one of us to say, Jesus, I believe and I receive what you did for me. Recognize I have sinned. I do bad things. Please forgive me of that, and I want to have you cause me to be something called born again, changed from within, so that you can have new life and be with God forever. So I offer you this. Jesus offers himself. He did on the cross for you. He loves you so much. He wants to know you forever. But you must believe what he did and receive him.
Amen. Thank you, Sue. I love listening to Sue when she's talking about the Lord. So next we have Doug's Creation Barrage. Please enjoy it, and we'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.
Don't let your geology mess up your theology. Sedimentary rock covers the continents at an average depth of 1.5 miles. Was that a gradual build-up over millions of years, or a year-long catastrophe like Noah's flood? Here's an evolutionary geologic column found only in textbooks. It's built by correlation. Does it represent reality? This column shows mostly vertebrates. That's skewed. But 95% of the fossils are invertebrates. 4.5% is plants and algae. Just a very small percentage of fossils are vertebrates. 95% of that is fish. But what if you find topsy-turvy fossils? Topsy fossils are supposed to be down, yet they're found up. Turvy fossils are supposed to be up, yet they're found down. I'll show a few examples. In Glacier National Park, here at Gunsight Mountain, the top layer is Precambrian. Underneath is Cretaceous. The entire park is upside down. At Tube Medicine, it is at the eastern end of the 50-mile out-of-order sequence. How could a section of mountains 350 miles long be uplifted and shoved over 50 miles? 25 miles west of Las Vegas, Nevada, in Red Rock Canyon, the rock sequence is Cambrian on top, then Jurassic, Triassic, and Permian. The gray rock is Cambrian and the red rock is Jurassic. 75 miles to the north and east is the Valley of Fire. That out-of-order sequence is the same: Cambrian, Jurassic, Triassic, Permian. In the middle is Precambrian Frenchman Mountain. Were there two overthrusts, one that created Red Rock Canyon, the other the Valley of Fire? Or was there one massive overthrust creating both? Or was this a Noah's flood event? South of Tucson, the Empire Mountains are Permian on top, then Cretaceous. But the contact is wavy, meshed like a gear. These and many other examples show that something is greatly wrong with the geology that we have been taught.